It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, for a nightcap with my co-host, Brett.
Hello, Alice. This is a nightcap because we've been talking for a while, but we have our best bud in true crime, our favorite defense attorney, Bob Motta, with us tonight to talk about all things LISK and maybe even a little bit of Delphi while we're talking.
Why not? We will always talk to Bob about anything he wants to talk about. But tonight we are talking about the Long Island serial killer who has just been recently arrested. And, you know, you guys got to stay tuned because Bob and I just might switch roles for once. And I think he might prosecute this case and I might just be defending it.
Oh, you're so good, Alice. You're so good.
I do what I can. Okay, let me ask.
She's a natural.
She's a natural. Exactly.
It's like I have a podcast or something.
it's like you do have a podcast or something.
Bob, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I wanted to jump on earlier. I had made a commitment because I obviously didn't know there was going to be an arrest in this case today. So, it started at the same time, but I was glad I was happy that you guys were still going. I came in, I'm like, is this still alive? You know, you guys are
you know
I never know. Yeah.
It wouldn't have been if we weren't messing up our ads for so long. We would definitely be off. So the fact that we can't do ads means that we got to talk to you and we got a surprise middle of the night episode tonight, which is the best way to spend a Friday night, Bob. And we love Defense Diaries.
Well, Bob, what do you think, man? It's been a big day in true crime.
Ooh, man. How about that thing?
Scarlett, should you be here for this conversation?
Well, even the dog's excited about this one.
Yeah, he gets jealous when Scarlett's hanging around with me. He's a very jealous guy. That was something, man.
I gotta say, Bob, usually you're like, the defense guy, but it seemed like from Twitter you feel like this dude might not have much of a case going forward.
Man, let me put it this way. I'm glad that I'm not defending him. Like that 32 pages read. I mean, like you go from like Richard Allen and then you graduate to the Kohlberger thing to this thing. And it's like, man, I mean, they put together a heck of a case. Like on its face, the thing is, shoo.
And do you think part of that is the experience? Like, so, I mean, think about it. Little nowhere town, Indiana.
Yep.
Doesn't know what they're doing. Indiana State Police have never handled big cases. I mean, honestly, let's be clear. You go to Washington, it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit more sophisticated. This dude, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, right? Like, I mean, they know what they're doing when it comes to handling a big case.
Yeah.
And they laid this out. This is how it's supposed to go.
Beautifully.
It's supposed to be like this.
Exactly. I mean, man, it was because when the story broke this morning, I opened my eyes and Jason Blair, our friend, had he hit me up. He tweeted me and he's like he tweeted me the Post article. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So I'm reading that and it's the Post, so I'm taking everything with a grain of salt. I'm like, has has the Times reported on this yet? I'm like, is this legit? And then, so I Googled it and I started seeing everything. And then, people are hitting me up and they're like, they're going, they're doing the presser at 4. I'm like, and then as the day progressed, I started hearing more nuggets, like, I don't know if it was leaks, but I heard about the phone pings. I heard about the, the hair and the belt, so it was like, it was really, and then when and then Jason sent me the bond application, man. And I'm like reading through it. I'm like, holy smokes, man.
And
It
you
was
know what was so
powerful.
interesting? Like you said, it's an incredibly powerful, tight-knit case, but they were also following him and they weren't finished with the investigation. And they only moved because they were balancing, of course, the risk to society. And just to think how many other investigative bodies would have jumped earlier and how much they already have, and they weren't ready to move yet because they wanted to tie more bodies to him to have a that the investigation to a lot of extent has to be over by the time you indict. And so clearly they were balancing, and they wouldn't take that risk to people he was potentially meeting up with, that he would start doing what they were investigating him for. And I don't think enough people realize that is a balance that happens in the investigative stage. When you know who you have, and you even have enough, you have more than, probable cause. You might even have reasonable doubt, but there's still more you want to do, and you're fighting against the clock to get your case done. And it is like a struggle that the public never sees. And I'm glad it was highlighted in this situation, because it is something that is always on the mind of law enforcement.
Yeah. And I mean, look, and they're still going to be digging. Like, I mean, they're still going to be investigating, and their balance was also safety. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they were obviously still this guy's still walking around with a burner, like on Tinder. I mean, like, there is no, like, I don't, like, the gap in time means nothing to me. I have zero doubt that they're going to connect more bodies to this guy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. All right, you got to go. Like, we're going to get into some stuff I don't want you to listen to.
Love the hat, though.
That's really fair. Scarlett, it's so nice to meet you.
Yeah, so nice to meet you, Scarlett.
I'll be down in a bit.
And, this is one of the things you run into when you're a prosecutor. Bob didn't know about any of these like heavy burdens that weigh on our shoulders, but oftentimes, you'll be in the middle of a deep investigation. You'll have wiretaps up. You're like really trying to figure out something. And then all of a sudden somebody on the wire says they're going to kill somebody. And the whole investigation has to fall apart because we got to go keep them from killing somebody.
Exactly.
And by the way,
this reminded me of.
If I'm ever like suspecting that someone's on a wire, I'm just going to threaten to kill someone because it shuts down the whole wire.
Shuts down the whole wire.
Literally, every time I'm like, I'm just going to go effing kill that person. And I'm like, mess up your wire.
We got to go pick him up. It's done.
Exactly.
It was like with Garcia, it was the same thing. Like their mandate. So they had basically collected a fair amount of evidence, like the PCA in that case, when I got it, they had built this background. They had this super compelling narrative in terms of this revenge theme that they had kind of built their case around, but they really at that point had a like mere presence type thing. And I'm like, and then when we first got the PCA, like Alice and I, when we got on the case, I'm like, man, they really only have like mere presence at this point. And like, I knew as soon as we got the discovery, because they in that case, they investigated all the way up until trial. Don Klein, the prosecutor, is like, I need you all out there. I want you finding the gun. I want, because like in that case, they didn't have forensics at all, so they were worried in terms of it being wholly circumstantial, but beyond that they just didn't have that thing that juries love, which is that forensic connection, either through DNA or something placing him at either of the scenes. And they they were nervous about it the whole way, So in that case, they really just kept going and going and going all the way up until trial. I mean, we were getting discovery like a month before trial because they still they got like a gun showed up like 2 years into the case that had been found by a trucker on a roadside, so they ended up and it obviously matched the type of weapon that was used at the crime. And Anthony Garcia's gun that he had bought, that they knew he had bought from Gander Mountain, had gone missing. You know what I mean? So it's like, they're definitely going to be digging into this guy. And I think that they were seriously concerned that he was going to commit more harm against citizens, like, and that was what they did with the Garcia. The mandate was like, look, if he heads south, because he was in Illinois and they were tailing him, it was a joint task force, same thing. The feds were on him. They involved the Illinois State Police because that's where he was. You had Omaha. So they said, if he starts heading south, that we believe that he's heading down to Louisiana to exact revenge on somebody at LSU. Like, so as soon as he made the turn, like heading south, as opposed to going back to Indiana, they pulled him over. They had him traveling too close. He had been drinking, so they arrest him on the DUI. They don't tell him what they arrested for him initially. They just get him into custody. And then they're like, hey, man, yeah, and then 2 cops from Omaha come in while he's in Illinois. And they're like, we need to talk to you about a case that, we're investigating from Omaha, Nebraska. Do you have any idea what we're talking about? And he lawyers up. So, because that was their best chance to ever get a statement from him. And he lawyered up. So, yeah, it's like, man, they have what they've built so far in a relatively short period of time. I mean, obviously there was that long period where it was cold and then they decided to dive back into it. But
right. And
this
this is
is
the task force, right? They started a task
force
force last year because it was essentially a cold case and they had nowhere to go. And this is exactly why, I mean, it may sound like an administrative sort of thing when you do task forces, but the reason you do task forces, especially in large, like law enforcement bodies, is to redirect attention and resources, right? We're all strapped for resources. When you have a task force, you get money allocated to that. You get eyes on it. Otherwise, your agents get pulled away. And like whatever break they got in this case, they've been on it. They've been diligent. And some of you have kind of asked, the press conference revealed a lot of information. Here's the thing. They also know how to do press conferences here. And yes, maybe there's more, not maybe, there is absolutely more information, but there isn't a harm in sharing information in the right way when you have correct people at the helm who know how to do media, right? The problem with sharing poor information is being a bad communicator, so you're misunderstood, and then not knowing how to handle follow-up questions because then you bungle whatever you're getting out. And so, like Brett said, it's not a joke. These are very sophisticated people who are investigating and prosecuting this case. They've done this before. This is not their first rodeo, and they've all had media training, and that matters. So, it doesn't surprise me that so much information came out because this was a cold case that probably got resources thrown at it when it became a task force. And so there is absolutely an interest in this case, and they are confident that they have the right person. They're not afraid of any more harm that he's doing. So they're fine sharing information because these murders are so old. But, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Bob, as well, in terms of task forces.
I thought it was an amazing press conference in the sense that, they were all congratulatory to each other because they realized how capable they were in terms of being able to work together. Because you guys know, sometimes law enforcement, different agencies won't play well together. There's that competitive balance where, sometimes that'll interfere with them in terms of being able to say, hey, this is what we got, because everyone wants to be able to take credit for the collar. And that just wasn't the case here. This was like a true joint task force where obviously anytime the feds are involved, the feds are going to be running the game for the most part, but like everybody had a hand in it. And the thing that I liked about it is because we were trending, especially when the Allen thing hit and they had sealed the PCA, which, I'm like, man, like constitutionally speaking, I don't know why they're doing that. And Brett and I had talked about that, Alice. I think you were out on maternity at that point. I don't know if you just had Brittany, but like you weren't there. And like we were talking about it and we were like, man, like there's got to be something in there. And then when it dropped, we're like, where is it? Like, where's the thing? And then we see the same thing that's going on in Idaho 4, where there's kind of a lack of transparency because of this fear of what's going on with social media. And I think maybe the fact that it all took us by giant surprise because they were masterful in not letting anything slip. They kept this thing as tight-lipped as you can possibly keep a case without any of us having any idea, and no leaks. So there was no buzz about an arrest happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, building up to the Idaho 4, I mean, just think back to what that was. It was like a nightmare. You know, I mean, just the social media and the Reddit and like everything was so insanely speculative, and people pointing fingers at innocent people and just coming up with theories based on nothing. You know, like, we had nothing at that point. Like, and I think that scared them into this kind of veil of secrecy where they're shielding us from everything that's going on in that case. And like you said, Alice, you nailed it. Like, with this, you're dealing with just pros. You're not going to have some Moscow cop coming out and saying that we think the public is safe because we think it was a targeted attack, you know, like, without them knowing whether or not that was true and just blurting that out. Like, these guys knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were putting out there. So I was super impressed with it. And yeah, like, this is exactly how it's supposed to be done. When you get something like that, like, if I'm defense counsel and I'm getting that thing, I'm like, man.
I mean, with that, Bob, everyone wants to know. So let's say he's your client, and this is, I mean, it is trending on Twitter. It is crazy. He says today, of course, not surprising, I didn't do it. He cries. He, what have you. What is your strategy in talking to your client on this first day when no one knew this was happening?
Exactly. Well, as soon as we get the bulk of, obviously at the first appearance, like, when I'm doing some kind of presser, I'm going to say, my client maintains his innocence. State's got a heavy burden, all the things that you say. And then I'm waiting for the discovery to come in. And then I'm looking and I'm saying, well, the first conversation I have when I go to jail and sit down with them, I'm like, well, we need to go through this piece by piece. This is what they're saying that they have on you, and it's problematic. They've built a very strong case. Now, obviously, when we get the discovery in, we'll do what we can to try to mitigate the damage if we can.
What about before you get the discovery? Like, you literally meet him at court and you guys are now alone. I mean, like, what do you say to him?
I'm telling him that we've got an uphill battle. I've never done anything with a client where I'm nothing but pragmatic and transparent with them. I'm not that guy that's like, oh, we're going to beat this case. Like, if I think they've got a very, very tough road to hoe ahead of them, I'm telling them that, and it's like, I've been doing this long enough to know when I can read a PCA that leans heavy guilty. And this thing is that, I always leave that wiggle room in the event that, I can find some flaws in the investigation, or, I have experts looking at the phone data or the DNA data, and they can poke some holes in it. But man, when you look at this thing on its face, you've got to be honest with your client, and you have to say, look, man, like, I hear you're telling me you're innocent, and I respect that. And, and if he comes back at me, well, like, I need a lawyer who believes in me. I'm like, that's not what we're dealing with right now. I'm in a position where I don't know. And all I have is what I have in front of me. And I could just tell you that based on my years of experience that we've got problems. You know what I'm saying?
What might be a strange question. I mean, I have never discussed this with you, but I take from your Twitter comments that you're not a fan of the death penalty. New York doesn't have the death penalty. In some ways, does that make your job harder as a defense attorney? Because if they did, yeah,
right, there's not that carrot. Like that's always the thing that you can use it to convince your client to take the plea. They're going to take death off the table, just take life without, and that, so yeah, it does. Cause it almost guarantees that you're going to go to trial because they have nothing to lose.
Right.
So it's like, yeah,
you can't give this guy anything. You can't give him a chance to be paroled if you're
right. There's nothing. Like, you're in that position where you're like, okay, well, we're going to just have to go to trial and hope the state screws it up, which, in a case like this, in that state, with those attorneys that'll be handling it, you're going to get the best of the best. You're going to get exceptionally bright attorneys from the prosecutor's office handling this. You're not getting like this guy they put on Sarah Turney's case, you know, her sister, Alyssa Turney's case. Like I'm watching that and like my heart's breaking because Sarah Turney's been fighting for justice for her sister forever. And when I'm watching it, I'm watching a prosecutor that looks to me as if he was the one who drew the short stick, you know, because that was a case where they don't have a ton of evidence at all. You know, it's a tough case. It's really a story that you're selling more than anything of evidentiary value, you know, and it's like no prosecutor, and I'm sure you guys will attest when you kind of get a dog case in there on its face, but you want to try to get justice for this victim, but you know that you just don't have a strong case. No prosecutors like dying to get this case to go in and get their ass handed to them because of the weakness of the case. You know what I'm saying? And like, I get that feeling with that. This case is not that, you know, whoever that top dog is in the prosecutor's office, they're all over this thing. And this is going to be their baby, you know?
And part of what you were saying earlier, Bob, you know, they're pros at this because the feds and the locals in New York work together all the time.
Right.
And we see that too in our, you know, the jurisdictions we work in. The more sophisticated jurisdictions, really the larger jurisdictions, work with the feds all the time. And so you actually have a lot of trusted relationship because you work with them on multiple cases. Unlike if you're dropping into some, you know, flyover country and the FBI don't know any of the locals, they don't know who to call to like, man, you got to do this right. Whereas there are a lot of personal relationships and a lot of people who have been in those positions for a long time. And so you have the institutional knowledge. This isn't going to be their first serial killer. You know, this isn't going to be their first rodeo by far. And that makes a huge difference when you have the different jurisdictions not only not have turf war, but have already established good working relationships from decades of working together.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's exactly right. I mean, that's like, you know, like when Alice and I were young lawyers and we had done something in the Southern District and it was a civil case, you know, and it was at that point that we realized like that the difference in the intelligence level of state court judges and federal court judges, and also in terms of AUSAs and state prosecutors. You know, it's like you're just dealing with like a different level of intelligence in terms of who they are recruiting to come into those offices. And like when you're dealing with New York State and when you're dealing with like Manhattan or the boroughs or New York City, I mean, you're getting the cream of the crop. You know, I mean, that's the big time. Like if you want to try cases in the, you know, the most prolific city in the world, that's where you go, you know? And so you're always, it's just going to be a completely different experience. And like, I'm so happy because, you know, like I'm always at war with Coffin Daffer on Twitter. I'm like, you know, and it's like when this, like the first, like, you know how bad it is with me and her. Like when the first thing I thought is like, oh my God, I'm like, this is finally going to get her off of Idaho 4. And then
I thought the same thing.
Yeah, you know, and I'm like, oh man. And like, and then when I see the PCA or what will be the PCA, because you know, I mean, it was really an application for bond, but like
this was just for bond,
right? You know, like that's going to be the heart of the PCA, you know.
And it was well written, you know. Like we read a lot of the documents from the other jurisdictions, and I'm like, can you even string sentences together?
And like yeah,
graphics and everything. Like
totally maps.
Again, for a bond filing, you know,
it was unbelievable.
Phenomenal.
And it was like when I was going through the Idaho 4 thing, I'm like, and I pull up a map and I'm like, wait, I'm like, they're talking about King Street, like Queen Street goes east and west, and I'm like, you know, I mean, they had like typos and stuff in there, and like I know in a case like that, you know, they're typically, the cops are obviously supplying the information, but you're typically going to have a prosecutor drafting that, because they understand the law. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this isn't like a smaller case where you can just have a cop come in and write out on a small burglary. Like on a major case like this, they're going to have the prosecutors never going to let anything go out without them either writing it or making sure that it was written properly and making whatever changes they have to make. So, and this thing was like a masterpiece, you know, like you're reading it and the thing is just like, I mean, they laid it out. It was like, talking about the victims, it was like reading a short novella. You know what I mean? It's like like if you didn't know anything about that case going in, after reading that 32 pages, you knew everything that you needed to know in terms of like the victims and when everything went down. Like they just give the history of the case, and then they dove into the meat of it. And man, it's powerful. I mean, and Brett, like that question, so on point. Like, what are they going to do? Like this, like I don't know. I mean, the guy's living in kind of a shanty. like I saw the pictures of the house. I'm like, this guy's an architect. What is happening? I mean, it's like, does it go to his
I was wondering the same thing, if
mind?
it went to his mindset. Apparently, it's
Right.
like his childhood home or whatever, and
Is
he
that what
has
the
other
deal is?
properties. Yeah, he
Okay.
apparently has other properties, but he's living like in his mom's home. And I'm
Wow.
fascinated by the
That's really
psychology.
interesting.
And I don't know, Bob, how early you came in, but I mean, one of the questions I was asking to Julia, who was an FBI profiler,
Yeah.
he's trying to get into, what makes someone like this do this, and the
Right.
complexities there. I mean, the eternal question.
Right.
And I wonder about the same thing, if that's like him living in his childhood home somehow is connected.
Reliving some trauma, or
Yeah,
like writing
yeah.
trauma.
or just never being able to escape that trauma, like he's never gotten over the trauma, and whatever drives these guys to doing this thing. It was like, I tried to dig into it with Gacy, and I'm trying to like talk to psychologists.
Because Gacy was a successful guy. I mean, that picture of Gacy standing next to the first lady. I mean, he had success.
It's like I was looking at, like I kept saying, I'm like, I feel like I'm looking at Gacy with this guy. When I was looking at him, and then I watched that bizarre 40-minute, like documentary he did with the guy from France, where and then he gets to the very, if you like painfully make your way through that entire 40 minutes, like the last few minutes where he starts talking about this hammer that he has, it sends chills up your spine. Like if you guys didn't make it that far into that thing, go to the last 5 minutes, and he talks about this hammer, and that he's had to use this hammer to handle things. Like, dude, it's so like, in retrospect, what we know now, and looking at that and hearing what he's saying, check it out, man.
Well, here's what's so interesting about that, because, one thing that Julia said, in her profiling experience, she said that he wants to portray success, and he does his, like, even the way he looks, but then the house is like the opposite of portraying not even success, but like respectable, right? You clearly stand out there. People are supposed to trick or treat there, as just little things like that, where, I don't have like the nicest lawn at all, but like, I try to at least make it look.
It doesn't look like a
presentable.
wild prairie. You know what I mean? I'm like, this guy has like some kind of wilderness prairie going on in his front yard, and like he hasn't had any kind of yard work done in years. Yeah, like, I mean, the depths of like what's going on in that guy's mind. And it's like, you hear them talking about burners. Like, to me, in my world, a burner is that you're going to some remote location that doesn't have video. You're using cash to buy a phone that is a burner. You're using cash to buy minutes on a card. Like, as soon as he starts attaching his name and or address or any kind of link to any of his other phone accounts, it's no longer technically a burner. It's like a burner is, I mean, there's not supposed to. And I was actually having a conversation with an ex-homicide guy today, like kind of while this, like not related to this. And he was telling me that he had a buddy that had developed this software that they ultimately ended up selling to LexisNexis, that basically is able to take so it extracts everything from a burner phone, and then it literally imprints it onto like kind of a data sheet where it'll give you data points. Like, the point being that it'll take what your typical phone use is from your normal phone. Like, say, like on Monday, he goes to the cleaners. On Tuesday, he goes to the Jewel and goes grocery shopping. He's typically texting from, and it overlays what you do normally on your own phone with what you did on the burner to show that the habits of both those phones. It's a really cool concept. And it was the first time I had heard of it. So it's a super interesting concept, and it sounds super useful as a tool.
It's like how people would create fake Twitter profiles and then follow the same people as their real Twitter profile. And like, you can figure it out. Like, people are just, it is just really hard for
Well, we
people
are
to stay
habitual
anonymous.
creatures, you know,
Yeah.
isn't that so crazy? Especially like serial killers. You know, we asked Julia, how do you tie them, like within the FBI, as being the same perpetrator? And it's that, like, we are not creative. We are actually creatures of habit, right? We kill the same way over and over. If you're a serial killer, you follow the same accounts. If you have lots of Twitter accounts, and if you use a burner phone, like your habits are still your habits. And that's
Exactly.
fascinating.
And,
And
and
also, we're just not very smart.
right. And I think that there's probably like a level of compulsion going on with him. You know, that's what I'm saying. It's like, we know, at least in terms of the arrests that were made and the charges that he was indicted on, that, you know, these things ended 10, 11, 12, 13 years ago. Like, that's like, if there's a compulsion, which when I find out that he's got a burner now and is still on Tinder, which is how he was procuring his victims, that tells me all I need to know. Like, and that tells law enforcement all they need to know, that the search is on. You know what I mean? And they're going to have more access, obviously, because at this point, like, that's
You
the
try
part of
and
the
use
investigation.
that. You
What?
try and use the fact that, like, he's still on Tinder. He's still going, you know, going to get to prostitutes. He's been doing this for 10 years. He hadn't murdered anybody. That like
we
somehow
know
they
of.
got it wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah, that we know of. That somehow they got it wrong. Like, yes, he likes to engage sex workers. He's been doing that for a long time. But somehow you've just, you know, you've messed this up, because if he were this person, he would have been murdering people for the last 15 years, and he hasn't.
I'm not touching that with a 50-foot pole, because I think that guy has been active the whole time. And what I think is going to happen is, I think that they're going to, now that they have access, because at this point they've got the search warrants, they are scouring everything, and like every device the guy had, every property that he has access to, his vehicles, they are going to be digging into everything at this point. And with an eye towards, because like, I guarantee you, if I'm thinking it, law enforcement's absolutely thinking that this guy is not limited to these 4 victims, you know, that there's more there, you know. And if we're to believe that kind of the second set of search terms, like where he's basically tracking his own case, you know, and these and he's typing in there, why haven't they caught the Long Island serial killer yet? And I'm like, I'm reading through like these 40 search terms where this guy is just like it smacked of
What do you do,
Zodiac
Bob?
stuff.
What do you do? How are you going to represent this guy? I mean,
Man,
What's your play?
You
just say reasonable doubt.
Until I'm digging into the discussion, like, on its face, it seems indefensible, right? I mean, like, there is,
but everyone gets counsel.
Everyone gets trial.
To their
everyone
burden.
gets trial, you know. But like, in the first thing I asked my dad, I'm like, you know, in terms of like defending cases, I'm like, and I asked him that. I said, well, you know, what happens if you have a guy who's clearly guilty, you know, and he's demanding that you go to trial? And my dad said, it's simple. You know, I defend the principles of the Constitution. I make sure that the cops did their job right. I make sure that the prosecution's doing their job right. And I make sure that he gets a fair trial. And then I've done my job. And to me, that resonated. It made sense. I mean, every case isn't about winning. You know, I mean, sometimes there's cases where you have facts that are so powerful. And we're talking, like Brett said, we have a case where there's going to be little to no incentive for him to plead out. He might as well take the shot at trial, you know, and you're stuck going to trial on it. I mean, because I'm stuck going to trial doesn't change anything about the fact that I am buried under a mountain of bad facts that I'm not going to be able to mitigate, you know? It's
so this is what I would do if I were the defense counsel, because you still have to tell a story. Yes, of course, you want to hold the government to their burden, but I would say, basically, I don't think I'd put many people on, if anybody, but say that he's a scumbag, but not for the reasons he's being accused of. He has this beautiful family and he's a successful man, but yeah, he engages sex workers and he's kind of a gross, you know, he's a sex fiend. He has a sex addiction even, but that doesn't make him a killer. So, you know, basically make him relatable as a faulty person, but not a serial killer.
Right.
And I would say, yeah, absolutely. How many people are on Tinder? How many people? He's embarrassed. He has a burner phone because he has a wife and kids and he has a respectable business and he works in Manhattan and he is, you know, a man who owns multiple properties. He has everything to lose. Why would he kill anybody? But he liked to have sex with people who are not his wife. That's
And
what
on
I
the
would say.
pings, it's
And it
like,
was
oh,
just
you've got a
really
ping from Midtown Manhattan. There
right.
are 20 million people in Midtown Manhattan, you know?
Right. And it was
In
just
my
really
building
bad luck
alone.
because he ended up hooking up with all three of these girls that he's been charged with first degree just before they were murdered, and he happened to leave his wife's hair on their bodies. That was all just a massive coincidence. Like
No,
you
no, no.
guys,
But here's the
these
thing,
are not
Bob.
the droids you're looking for.
Bob, I know you're a much better attorney than that. What you do as any attorney is you just ignore the facts, right? Like,
Well,
yes,
you
I
have
agree
to.
with you. Those are the facts, but I'm not talking about the hair. I'm not even going to try to defend the hair. I'm literally just going to tell my story with blinders on,
Right.
as if you're not talking, prosecutor. And
Totally.
because the jury, it's very effective. I've seen this done effectively by very good defense attorneys. They are drawn in. If you're a good storyteller and you
Right.
have their rapt attention, they will listen to everything you're saying. And your version of the story didn't have anything to do with hair. So what you're
Right.
telling me is absolutely right.
Right.
And all you need is one person. That looks like my dad. That looks like my son. That looks like someone I know. There is no way an architect would give up everything to go kill all these women. How would he even have time? He's busy building buildings, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
and that's
like,
what I would do.
yeah, like the reality is I'm obviously looking into like some kind of mental defect defense. Like like immediately I'm getting him evaluated. But you know, like it always harkens me back to what went on with Gacy. Now Gacy left my father and Amarante no choice because he had come in and he gave 5 statements and admitted to killing at least 6 of the kids. You know what I'm saying? So like at that point, there was no walking it back. Like, you know, he was in custody. He waived his rights. There was no suppressing those statements. They were coming in. And so they knew that their only avenue was going to be that he's mentally ill, that he's got a sickness, that he's got a compulsion. Like, because back then it's still impossible. It's the hardest defense. It's the absolute defense of last resort. I mean, like no defense attorney, because no one believes it, you know. And you've got this guy that is doing the exact same thing that Gacy, like it's exactly like you guys were saying. Gacy on his face, the guy was a Democratic precinct captain. He was making, like in today's money, $500,000 a year as a contractor. Everyone loved him. Like on its face, there's no way that anyone was thinking this guy was a serial killer. And to try to get a jury to believe that he can do that during the day and turn into this monster at night is an impossible task. And you're dealing with the exact same thing with this guy. And it's going to be, but I mean, in all honesty, that's where I'm going. Like, instead of like just kind of avoiding the bad facts and just ignoring them and telling my narrative and saying, look, there's an easy explanation for all of these things, because if you have a capable prosecutor,
I will say this though,
they're going to drive home those points.
Because people may not realize this. Just because facts are overwhelming, and honestly, guys, a lot of cases are like this, where the facts are overwhelming, they still go to trial because he has nothing to lose. In this case, he has nothing to lose whatsoever. Right. Exactly. And so,
and I want to ask a question about this. I want to ask a question about this. Do you think, Bob, as a defense attorney, if you have a defendant who you believe is guilty and you think the evidence shows they're guilty, and maybe even the defendant's willing to say they're guilty, and you're in a situation like this one where if they're convicted, they get life without parole. If they plead guilty, they get life without parole.
Right.
Do you feel sort of a moral or an ethical obligation to say, do not plead guilty, let's go to trial, roll the dice? Do you think it's almost unethical as a defense attorney to tell them to plead guilty if they have nothing to gain from it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And it's a legit question, but what I'm telling him is basically we've got nothing to lose, because that's the truth of it. From a selfish perspective, I know I'm going in there with no chance to win it, but I'm also like, I'm having to have that conversation with him because ultimately that's his decision whether or not we go to trial. It's not mine. It's like he gets to make that call. Like, that's not one of the things that I get to decide. That's strictly in the purview of the defendant, and he's going to ask me that same thing. He's going to say, well, like, what do I have to lose? And my answer is going to have to be nothing. I mean, like, either way, you're not going to have a trial tax because they can't. You're not getting an offer less than life without the possibility of parole. So like, and if you're found guilty, that's the only thing that they can give you.
Mhm.
So, I mean, from that perspective,
And
I'm going to do,
I'll even
whatever my client tells me to do,
And that's
whatever.
very nice. That's very nice of you to say. But to answer your question, Brett, it's interesting when you say, is it unethical to tell them to do anything but go to trial? But then obviously, because Bob, you do something that we don't have to do. Going to trial, obviously, yes, you get to roll the dice, but there are a lot of costs to going to trial. Everything becomes
Huge.
public. Witnesses are on there. I mean, it's already, a lot of it's already out there, but your loved ones get to watch the parade of victims and everything you did to them and the autopsies. And I mean, it is gut wrenching. And
Nightmare.
of course, a psychopath may not be affected by that, but all of the people who know him and love him and maybe still support him in spite of or because they can't believe it will know all of this for all time. And that certainly is something to factor in that I don't think is as easy as, oh,
It's
you
not.
shouldn't advise that because it's just because you at least get to roll the dice.
And that's what I'm trying to sell him on. Like sometimes I'll have clients that would insist on going to trial, and Alice, what you just like exactly what you just said is my sales pitch to them to not go to trial, because you're about to lay it all out on the line. All these deep dark secrets that you've had for a decade plus are about to become public knowledge if we go to trial. And it's a compelling argument, in terms of me trying to convince my client, this is why we don't go to trial. You just say, look, you got me, and I'm going to call it a day. And then everything is going to stay with people wondering what happened and what went on, as opposed to you torturing the victims' families with them having to relive it all, torturing your own family, your parents, if they're still alive, your wife and your children. Like, do you want your kids having to try to go to school anywhere in this country with this case being publicized on the front page of the paper and on the news and online every day for the next 3 years? I mean, like it's a compelling argument in terms of why, like, but at the end of the day, if you've got that guy that's just like, I want to go, like, I've got to go, like I can't tell him, no, I'm not going to go to trial on your behalf, so I would obviously try to sell him on that approach. And it's a tough gig,
But I
because
have to,
dealing with that defendant side of it is a whole different thing,
and I have to say, and tonight it's kind of funny. We're kind of switching roles a little bit, but and I want to throw this a hard thing that the defense has to do when you have a tough case like this and you have a client who insists on going to trial. There very well may be an appeal based on ineffective assistance of counsel. So even though you are convinced of everything, you still have to document why you don't put on character witnesses. You have to show
Sure.
that like this person's going to like ruin you if they get put
Right.
on there. And so you actually still have a ton of work in a case like this where it seems like a slam dunk for the prosecution if your client wants to go to trial, because you actually have to document and do
Everything.
just as much investigation as if you thought you had a chance
Exactly.
of
I
winning
am preparing
because
that.
of ineffective assistance of counsel.
Exactly. I'm preparing that case as if I'm going to win it. I'm prepared. Like, the difference in my preparation is the exact same as any case that I try, no matter what. Like, I never go into a case assuming I'm going to win or lose, no matter how strong the facts are. Like, I have to prepare the case because I have to go in there and do my job properly in order to avoid that. Because, like, the only way we get justice for the victims is, number one, making sure that we got the right guy, and number two, making sure that he got a fair trial so that we're not having to do it again. For the purposes of the victims' families, having to go through that twice is just unthinkable to me. So so what you always want that strong attorney on both sides of the aisle going in and putting on a good trial. And from me, from a like private practice standpoint, like, if I have a case like this and he's retained me privately, and he's saying, I want to go to trial, I know for a fact that it is shutting the rest of my business down for 3 years. I mean, I've lived it. Like, when I was doing like Garcia case, it was all encompassing. I couldn't work on anything else. I mean, fortunately, we had 2 young attorneys, but I have then a stable of clients that are saying, who the hell are these 2 young guys? I hired you guys. You know what I'm saying? And like new business, I'm not in a position to keep signing new clients coming in because I know that I'm not going to have the time to do. I mean, and my dad told me, like, when we took Garcia's, like, it's a practice killer. Your practice is going to be shut down for 3 years. And it was. It really was. It's like for like the cost benefit analysis in terms of like what we made on that case is like I made like $4 an hour, because like I'm traveling to Omaha, I had to move there. And it was just, it was that type of case where it spanned 13 years, 5 years in between two double homicides. And it was a massive, massive case and it had everything. It had DNA, it had data. So like just trying to get our experts lined up and trying to pour through everything. It's like, it's a massive thing. And it's like you said, Alice, there is no, you just don't slide in there hoping to just kind of like go through the motions,
And can
like
we've answered this question before, Bob, but let's just shut it down yet again. People have asked, why don't you just throw the case as a defense attorney and get the conviction appealed?
No way. You don't, that's number one.
It's unethical.
It's unethical. It's like, I would never, ever do that.
You could
like,
lose your bar license doing something like that.
Exactly. And you should, if you even contemplate it. Like if that's something that you would contemplate, you have no business being an attorney at all. So like as far as that goes, that's not even an option for anybody who's a good, competent, ethical attorney. That's not even something you could do. It's like I'll always see that during trials. Are they throwing? No, I'm like, no, they're just bad lawyers.
And
I'm like, they're not intentionally throwing the case.
It's
they're
not
just
like the
bad lawyers.
appellate court's stupid or something, and they're going to somehow like overturn the conviction because of that. Worst case for everybody is you get remanded for a new trial and there's double the resources. I mean, like you're not going to, the facts aren't going to change. It's still going to be a trial at some point, and you're wasting everybody's resources.
Yeah, and time, and you're putting the victim's family through the nightmare again. You know what I mean? Like that's always where it lands for me is like, like I said, I mean, at the end of the day, when I have bad facts like that, I'm going to go in. I'm obviously going to do my due diligence. I'm going to hire my experts if my client can afford to hire them, or I'm going to go to the county and say, well, you give me a few bucks to get some experts on board so I can have them. I want to vet him mentally. I want him to be evaluated, and I'm going to hire the experts if I can find somebody to do anything with the phone data, and I'm going to hire somebody to see if they can do anything with the DNA. And they're going to come back and they're going to tell me, well, it's tough. It's like, it's one of those things where like you're hiring an expert and they know what you're hiring them for, and it's like, and if they're ethical, they're not going to go to a place that they're not willing to go in terms of saying something that they can't say with some kind of medical certainty or scientific certainty. Like I've never had an expert where I've found like that was just some scumbag who's like, yeah, I'll say whatever you want for, it's like people that are good at their trade and take pride in what they do for a living just aren't going to do that. So, and ultimately, if you're hiring some bottom feeder because out of desperation, because you can't find an expert, like I had an awful case it wasn't a homicide, but it was a child that was a stepchild of my client's. Kid was like 3 years old. He was young. And my client was arrested saying that he had taken his stepson's hand with his hand, and he had held his son's hand over a burner on the stove. And he had this like burn here, right? So, and my client's story was that no, he was jumping. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was on the top of his hand. Okay. And it was a perfect circle. All right. So in the state's theory was that he had held his stepson's hand over the flame, high enough to where it burned made this hideous wound. And my client said, I would never do that. And this guy was like, had a master's in engineering, had served in the military, was like, just for all intents and purposes, I was having a really hard time seeing this guy as the kind of person that would do that to a young boy like that. It was like, cause it's unfathomable. I have like 4 kids, and I could the concept of even doing that is so foreign to me that it's hard for me to grasp that somebody could do that to a kid. And I'm like, all right, so you're telling me you didn't do this. Tell me what happened. So he's like, I had gotten home. He had gotten in trouble in school. But he's laying this kind of groundwork with me that this little boy was lying all the time in school, that he was prone to telling tall tales, and that it was established that I'm going to get the school records, and I'm going to see that this kid was always telling fibs and like big fibs. Like, oh yeah, somebody touched my wee, and like this, where they would get like investigated and they'd find that it was not founded or unfounded. And so his story was that the boy was jumping out, that the door to the minivan opened, and they was picking him up from daycare, and the kid jumps out because he likes to play Superman every time he's going to jump out of the van, and that he was holding a hand of his backpack, the straps of his backpack, and he hits and he tumbles, and that he scraped his hand. So he was saying it was like a friction burn because it looked like the skin had peeled away. So the point of this story is I spent 7 months sending pictures and the evidence that I had, trying to find a doctor, an expert. And I wouldn't tell him anything about the case. I'm going to
That's so good, Bob, for you to show that like something like that, you have to, pound the pavement to get all of the best experts.
It's been long enough. Well, the point of the story was that I couldn't find a doctor.
Yeah.
Every doctor that looked at those pictures, like, it's a burn. They would like it's clearly a burn, and I'm like, wait, could it be like a friction burn that he got? And he's like, no. He's like, that's clearly a burn. So I'm like, I end up finding like a wound guy who had no CV to speak of. This is after 6 months of me diligently searching for anybody that had some street cred, that had like a suitable CV where I'm going to be able to put them on and they're going to be able to withstand like a cross-examination by the prosecution where they're kind of digging into them and saying, is this guy a quack? Is this guy just like a hired gun who's going to say what, you know what I mean? So like, it's tough. It's tough out there. Like, yeah. So I do not admire whoever's going to, because like, I'm assuming the guy has some assets. I'm assuming he's going to hire somebody, and I'm curious to see who it's going to be.
It's going to be tough.
It's going to be really tough.
It's going to be.
So I want to shift gears just a little bit, and I won't spend another hour on it, but I am curious about your thoughts.
All right.
Let's say that you had a client who was accused of a double murder, and he has confessed 4 or 5 times to his wife and his mother. What do you do in that circumstance?
I mean, like, I was sitting in that courtroom for that. I was like, and when it came up, I'm like, well, like we're about to hear what this guy confessed to. So it's kind of like Alice and I, like we discussed it in our episode. I mean, the first thing that I'm doing is they have the benefit of listening to what was said. All right. So we have McClelland like in court saying like that he said the words, I killed those 2 girls. And then I've got Rosie over there acknowledging it, like there was no, like, so Rose, I know that it happened. All I'm caring about at that point is the context. So like, say for instance, if the lead into that sentence, to that phrase was, well, they said that I'd go home if I just admitted to killing girls. So, okay, I killed the 2 girls. Can I go home now? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things that could have happened with that statement. None of us will know until we hear them in full, because like, I'm very pessimistic about the defense and what their strategy has been. And I've put it out there, and Allison, and I wasn't even devil advocating that was me, how I genuinely felt, that I found it extremely convenient that 10 days earlier that Baldwin's out there at the prison and goes to great lengths in the motion that they file to talk about how absolutely normal his client was, that he was thinking properly. I came in with good news about his case and he was accepting it. He was excited about the possibilities. And then all of a sudden, 10 days later, he's on a phone with the person he trusts more in the world. No one in the world does he trust more than his wife. And he's making these admissions. And then Tracy's getting off the phone, or Kathy's getting off the phone, and she's calling him. It's Kathy, right? I always mix it. I think it's Kathy is his wife's name. She's calling Baldwin or Rosie and saying, oh my God, he's on, like, I had to hang up on him. He's confessing to me on a recorded jail line. Cause like if Rosie's anything like me, I tell my clients, hey, make sure that when you're on the phone with your loved ones or your friends, you're not talking about your case because they're recording everything. And if you make confessions, they're going to know about it. So I just so they're in the car the next day. So they're out there making the drive. They're out there on the 4th. The phone call happens on the 3rd. They're out there on the 4th, and the motion gets filed on the 5th. And in that motion, like I was telling Allison, I'm like, why in the world would they admit in a pleading that their guy was normal just 10 days earlier? Because you know what Judge Gull is going to say? when they try to have their psychiatrist or psychologist come up there and say, oh, yeah, well, in that 10 days, the schism that happened, she's going to find the fact that they absolutely talked about how normal and how well adjusted their client was just 10 days earlier, that she's not going to buy anything that they're saying. And it's going to seem that it was out of convenience. Like when we knew that there was something wrong with Garcia early on, we challenged his competency immediately, like within the first 3 months. And one of the reasons I did it was to get him out of his confinement, because he was in the same situation 23 hours a day. Will take a toll on you mentally. That's just factual. I don't think that any of the things that were going on that Baldwin and Rosie put in that motion in terms of like the torture and the prisoner of war, that was all bullshit. Like, I think he's being treated the exact same way that everybody in the A pod is being treated. And he just happens to be in the pod that is with the convicted murderers and rapists. It's the max pod in a max prison, right. So he's getting the same food, the same clothes, same privileges as everybody else in that pod, and they're watching him 24/7. You know what I'm saying? They got him. They got him on lock. They had the companion program where it's either a cop or a fellow inmate that's standing out there. They have him under. Do I think that they're messing with them? Yeah. I mean, like, that's part and parcel of when you're a high profile defendant in a case. People are going to mess with you. The inmates are going to mess with you mentally. The guards are going to mess with it. It's just part of the thing. Do I like it? No. But is there any way to change it? No. It's been going on since there have been jails, and it's going to continue to go on. But as far as him sleeping on the floor, like, he's choosing not to eat. He's eating the documents and wetting them down. No one's forcing him to do that. So, I mean, the answer to your question is I'm obviously going to try to have him evaluated. I'm going in knowing that if I can't do anything with this, that they're going to stick. The judge is going to say it's going to go to wait. I'm not suppressing anything. You haven't convinced me of anything. I think that these are and beyond that, if like the argument I was making in our pod, I'm like, look, just because if they say that he's schizophrenic or he's got some kind of mental illness going on, that doesn't mean that what he said wasn't true.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's what the problem is. Maybe it makes him more prone to telling the truth. Mm-hmm. As opposed to making up some fanciful, I don't know, man. I think the thing's going to plead out, man. I really do. Well,
look, I think, especially with the news today, this has already been a fascinating year for true crime.
We love you, Bob. We are so glad that you are a friend to us and to the podcast, and you always have brilliant things to say. So you guys check out Defense Diaries. We know you already do, but in case you somehow haven't, go listen to Bob more. And we are so happy that we got to be joined by Scarlett today as well, who is really,
the best
the best Motta, and also the brains in that family. So
her Allison, definitely her Allison.
That's right. Exactly. The women in that family are just strong. And I love that.
Me too.
So with that said, until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Thanks, Julia.
Thanks, Julia. You're welcome to stay. We're gonna do ads. I assume you don't want to stay while we record ads, but
oh no, that's okay. No, actually, I could learn something probably. So
no, you don't. You truly don't. You probably watched TV before, and they do it better. So
no.
So for everybody asking, I'm drinking from this is a single malt whiskey from John Emerald Distillery, which is out of Opelika, Alabama. I had a trial in Opelika and decided if we won, I was going to pick up some whiskey, and of course we won.